the whole team had assembled. We had the scientists building their lab as we were getting the first samples. Rannva had not been in the cave at this point, and I've been going on for 2 years plus about the beauty of it. And Rannva and I, we've been diving a lot together, and we always, you have to dive in a single profile when you go cave diving. And it's always a matter of who gets to go first, because being first, you just get that wow on the cave. And it was her time, and I was really excited to see her dive into Laui Laui. And it was just a beautiful moment.
You're listening to Speaking Sidemount, the podcast where we talk all things sidemount and cave diving, from equipment, skills, techniques, and cave diving expeditions to interviews with some of the world's top sidemount and cave divers. Whether you're new to sidemount, been sidemount diving for years, or just want to know more, this is the place for all things sidemount. I'm your host, Steve Davis. Let's get wet. Hey, welcome back to Speaking Sidemount. I'm Steve Davis. This episode is brought to you by our brilliant sponsor XDEEP and by the patrons of Speaking Sidemount. Huge thanks to both for their support that makes everything you are watching and listening to possible. Also supporting the show is Sidemount Pros and the Sidemount Fundamentals eBook. More on that later in the episode. Well, in this episode, I had the great pleasure to catch up with Maria Bollerup. I haven't known Maria for that long. We met a couple of years ago, 2022, at the OzTech conference in Australia. It was absolutely amazing to meet Maria and also her friend and exploration partner, Rannva Joermundsson, who's been on the show a few episodes back. At Maria and Rannva's presentations there, we learnt about Expedition Xunaan Ha that they undertook with Robbie Schmittner. Again, the subject of 2 separate episodes with Tamara May and also with Robbie Schmittner himself previously, so go back and have a listen to those. So it was awesome to hear about that all-female project. And then they covered Expedition Buteng, an expedition to Muna in Sulawesi, the home of Robin Questa. Robin and I have dived together before. He's also been on the show. And this area is an absolutely amazing limestone karst region in the remote regions of Sulawesi. What captured me about this particular project was not just the cave exploration, not just the fact that they were mapping and surveying the caves. What really captured me was everything that went around it. I think a lot of this they learned through their experiences with Robbie on Xunaan Ha. And what's different about this is the way that they're incorporating media in the first place with video and photography work. Alex Dawson is on this particular project for the photography side. And then on top of that, the science. They've involved 2 universities, one in Indonesia, one in Denmark, to undertake groundbreaking science in terms of the aquifer there in Sulawesi. And then on top of that, again, looking at the cultural aspects and the relationship between the local people there and the aquifer, and helping to educate not only them, but also a global audience through live sessions, going into classrooms and schools and inspiring the next generation of explorers. It was amazing to hear from Maria. Brilliant to hear the passion that she has both for this project and also for everything else that they're doing under Nixie Expeditions. So I hope you enjoy this episode. One thing before we start the episode, if you like this podcast, please give us a like, please subscribe and leave us a comment. The comments really make a difference to the algorithm, as does your likes and subscribes. It makes a difference in helping us to grow Speaking Sidemount to be everything that it can be in the dive community. Thanks, and let's get on with this episode of Speaking Sidemount. Hey Maria, welcome to Speaking Sidemount.
Hey Steve, it's good to be here. I've been looking forward.
Yeah, thanks so much. And look, you and I have just been through half an hour of technical difficulties, so I want to start out by thanking you for bearing with me. It's quite uncommon now for that to happen, but thanks so much for hanging in. I really appreciate you being here.
Absolutely no problem. I'm glad we got it sorted out. It is early for you and getting late for me, sitting in different parts of the world. But I'm excited to be here and to talk to you.
Awesome. Yeah, we're in exactly opposite time zones. So it's now 7:36 a.m. for me, 7:36 p.m. for you. So amazing that we can actually do this. I think it's one of the great things about being in this time. So yeah, amazing that we can do it. You and I, look, we've known each other not that long. I think a couple of years. We met at OzTech in 2022. And I had the
That's
great
right.
pleasure to listen to your presentations that you did with Rannva. First on Expedition Xunaan Ha with Robbie Schmittner, which has been the subject of a few podcast episodes now. Tamara May, Robbie himself, and Rannva, of course. And then you talked about Expedition Buteng, which just absolutely captured my imagination. No Robin Quester. Robin's been on the show, and Robin and I have dived together. Great guy to hang with, great guy to dive with. That in itself connected me again to the project. But what really captured me was just the depth that you'd put into it, the thinking behind what you were going to cover. It's not just cave exploration. You've got the mapping and survey, which, of course, if you don't do that, you haven't really explored in many people's thinking. And then on top of that, the scientific aspects, the cultural and the community aspects, and then education on top of that. So there was just so much there. And I was just reminiscing about us catching up in 2022, but we did a fair bit of socializing too, which was more than just a little bit of fun. So I guess we should start by us asking how you are after coming back from Indonesia. I know you were a little bit unwell for a while.
Yeah, I'm getting better, but definitely coming back. I think I had about 6 weeks of being completely under the weather with all different types of infections. And in the pre-talk, we discussed if it could just have been working too hard, and I think absolutely. This was the first project that we were on the planning side of things. So one thing is being a team member and showing up and having prepared yourself mentally for the diving part. But this was 2.5 years of meticulous planning and worry. We were trying to do so many things at the same time, and lots of things went through. I mean, the expedition went incredible. We were very proud when we were out there seeing what we had orchestrated, and we had an incredible team as well. They were definitely the majority of the success, but the worries up until start was probably the hardest part of the expedition. And one of the things we're getting a container full of equipment from Scandinavia to Indonesia, which we failed completely on. But I definitely lost a lot of hair and added some years to my face. My God, I cannot recommend that to anyone. It is it's not worth it.
Yeah, especially the first time. I think, once you've done it, now that you've done it, I'm sure the next time would be much easier. But I know from my own experience, the first time you do anything that's incredibly complex with a lot of moving parts tends to be a big learning experience. What I normally do on the podcast, we've already started getting into it, which is awesome, but I'd love to have some background. I mean, I know a little bit about you and a little bit about your background, but I don't know the full story of Maria and how she got into diving and what about diving captured you. So could you share a bit about your background and how you got into diving?
Sure. Diving is what I've always done, or it's the only thing I've ever done, I guess. I was 15 years old when I got my patio water course on a Greek island. It was a birthday present from my parents, and I think to begin with, huge regret from them, especially my father, as I rushed home and sold my pony to buy dive gear for. And I grew up on a farm away from the ocean, but I always had this imagination about being weightless. There's something about that feeling of floating around, and even though I hadn't tried it, it was just a constant in my life from when I was little. And then I put on the gear and I got taught to dive, and that was it. So when I was 18 years old, I dropped out of school and I traveled from the farm to Jordan to become a dive master. This is back 20, I'm giving up my age now. This is 22 years ago in Aqaba, Jordan, back where there was no airport, where I was the only woman there working with blonde hair. So I was not allowed to stay inside in the apartment with the rest of the staff. I had to live on a rooftop. But it was incredible. Just getting out on the ocean every day and guiding people and like being in the ocean, it was a dream come true, and that was what kind of bolted my career forwards. I became a dive instructor. I started my own company when I was 22 called Blue Venture Diving, which is a dive travel agency, business to business, so not end consumer, but working through different travel agencies, sending out young backpackers to dive on good dive centers around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of did that because I realized that I couldn't sustain a life as a full-time instructor. My body was just not strong enough. Like, my hat off, I was out in Asia for a couple of years, teaching courses back to back. And that stamina of 3 dives a day in high season, a full month of dive, well, you know what it's like, right?
Yeah, it can suck the fun out of it too, though. You say you loved it, but I mean, I think you do 1 year of that, you do 2 years of it, and at some point you do, I think, hit a wall, don't you?
Yeah, true. I mean, I kind of pretty fast moved into becoming dive center manager because I really like the whole planning around the diving as well, and having the machine running and so on. But yeah, it was just too much with that back to back, and knowing that I had to teach these courses or get on the boat down. So that means I was forced to start this dive agency, and that took me diving all around the world using what I had learned managing these dive centers when picking out the contracts for my company. And that made me come to Mexico and get on a rebreather. And then from there on, I started this whole technical aspect. I had a really bad hit. I was working in Borneo as an instructor, and long story short, but I had a serious hit on the central nervous system, which meant that afterwards, like, this is a full podcast of just talking about DCS, but let's not go there. The short story is that it kind of forced me as well to start diving differently, having different gases. The rebreathers really applied to that whole physical part of diving, where you're just that little bit more safe and less tissue tension. Yeah, so
And it's quite interesting because a lot of people think rebreathers are so much more dangerous, and I think quite often we ignore the safety aspects that rebreathers bring to you. I mean, the ability to blend the perfect nitrox, for instance, as an example, on the fly all of the time for your entire dive. The ability to drive 100% O2 when you're doing your decompression stop at 6 meters. The ability to have, as Ed Sorensen beat into me, in cave diving, time stress, distance stress, gas stress, all of that goes away. So there's a big safety aspect, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. You were just talking about this age of technology, and that really applies to diving as well. But, we used to call nitrox for voodoo gas.
Yeah, exactly.
The knowledge that we get is constantly changing, isn't it?
Sure.
But that was a very fast and messy summary of, it was just a full life of diving, and I was attracted to the whole industry because it is a different industry, isn't it? From the clients that we have that come on holiday, to the people that we introduce to this environment, to cave diving, to wrecks. I mean, there's so much going on industry and experience wise, adventure wise. It's just, you can never ever go the whole full circle. There's always more to learn and fine tune and discover. It's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. So from that start, you mentioned you got into technical diving, and let's jump from there. Let's jump quite quickly into Xunaan Ha, because I think, if I'm right, that was kind of the beginnings of the exploration journey for you and for Rannva, who's your friend and exploration partner. Again, Rannva was in one of our earlier episodes, but I think that kind of captured my imagination too. I think there were a number of aspects. Obviously, most strikingly, it was an all-female project with the exception of Robbie, which in itself is cool and kind of, I think it was good from an attention-grabbing point of view as well. And then on top of that, I think the whole mentoring aspect of it was awesome. And I love that. From my business career, I've always thought that mentoring is one of the very, very best ways to learn anything. So tell us a bit about the part that Xunaan Ha played in you then moving more into cave exploration.
The mentoring part was huge in that. I'd known Robbie for years, and with Rasmus Deistedt, my husband, we had been doing quite a lot of different exploration at the time as well, also in Mexico, and we even played around with Robbie earlier as well. But on your own agenda, and your own curiosity into what Robbie was putting together in Xunaan Ha, where he was adding the full team, but he was also adding media, he was also adding science, the whole box fracture thesis that he was trying to prove and was proving during that project completely blew my brain. And then of course the mentoring aspect of it, of him going in explaining how he had been exploring for years and how he was reading the caves, and that was absolutely incredible and took us all completely bored. We were in there with full hearts, but the whole project started with him just laying down the threats and what was going on in Mexico. And we've been cave diving there for years, and I had no idea, none of us had an idea of the full extent of the pollution that was going on. So he kind of opened our eyes for adding the skills that we had acquired doing cave diving and to some extent exploration up until that point, and then applying that whole scientific aspect of it along with the media, because we all know that there's a lot of science going on. There's a lot of people working in fields that we will never get in contact with, but adding media to that so people could kind of follow along and understand what we were doing out there, I found that very interesting because, you know, in your line of work, you're very used to speaking with people and inspiring them and explaining what we see underground, not even just in caves, but just diving in general. And people are generally interested, but it's very few people that has the opportunity to dedicate the amount of time you have to dedicate to go to the extent of exploration in caves. Sure. And suddenly we could add a conservation aspect to that passion and that dedication. Does that make sense?
100% it does, yeah. And what's sort of coming to me right now is when you look at jumping from that to Expedition Buteng and what I mentioned earlier about the entire corpus of what you and Rannva pulled together for that. Was that the genesis of that? Was that the beginning of the thinking around Buteng and the way that you would bring that project together?
Absolutely. Robbie Schmittner has inspired us and helped us in unspeakable ways. I remember sitting at or during the project in Mexico, during Xunaan Ha, and speaking with Rannva because it was just 1 year earlier that we were in Indonesia with Robin. It was Pete Mesley, Rasmus Dijsted, and Robin Cuesta, and we were macheting around in the jungle. We were using drones, and it was full on Indonesian jungle exploration. And I came back from that experience, and this was during COVID, so the whole world closed down, and the local government in this island, Pulau Muna, where Expedition Buteng just took place, they kept on poking to keep exploring. And Robin was then poking me back in Denmark saying, are you going to come back and do some more? So sitting at Xunaan Ha, looking at what Robbie was teaching us and how he had put his project together, I realized we can do this. And we can do it in a scale that is actually going to do a difference in Indonesia. So asking Rannva, she said yes, Robin said yes, Rasmus said yes, and we put together Expedition Buteng. And we might have gone a little bit overboard, but it all worked out. And yeah.
I thought it was amazingly ambitious, and it was ambitious from the point of view of where you had to travel to. It's no small thing to go from Europe. So small thing to come from New Zealand. We're in the same part of the world pretty much, but to go to Sulawesi, it's a big deal. And then it's extremely remote. So, I mean, I think it was ambitious from that point of view, but also ambitious because of, again, the scope of what you were looking to accomplish. Not just cave exploration, not just mapping and surveying, but incorporating universities, you know, both from Indonesia and Denmark, also incorporating the cultural aspects. I just thought it was an absolutely brilliant conception. I'm just going to refer to my notes for a minute because I have some questions I want to ask. We talked a little bit about the conception of the project there, and I think obviously there's one thing to conceive a project and to actually do that. And you mentioned the initial team of yourself and Rannva and Rasmus, but you then pulled together what I would regard pretty much as a dream team for this project. Tell us a bit about how you managed to convince people. I'm sure it wasn't hard, but how did you convince people to come and work with you on this project?
You're right, it wasn't hard at all. We sat down and we thought, because Rannva and I from start, we were very honest about what was our forces and what wasn't. And looking at the project itself, we needed to push the cave to its full extent. So we needed somebody who would have the experience and had been doing a lot of just pushing underground caves. So did that make sense? So we needed somebody who had...
Yeah. Well, it does to me. Let's talk about that for those who are not cave divers on here right now. So what is a push dive?
So a push dive literally is you jump in the cave, and this is an unexplored cave, or it can be a cave that has been explored, but then you go to the end of line. So when we cave dive, we follow a guideline. And when that guideline ends, this is where the exploration starts. So a push dive is where you go to the end of the line and then you lay a continuous new line. So you literally just start mapping or finding out new passages. And that is the heart and soul of cave exploration. That is going into a tunnel where nobody has been before, and you pick the way. And it might sound easy because you imagine a tunnel and you just follow along on that, but tunnels can be super hard to read, and they can have collapses, and they can have corners that you can't see. So what you think is the right way sometimes is just not. So it can be a lot of just poking around in really silty and narrow passages, and sometimes it is diving through colossals and beautiful galleys. So for push diving, we needed somebody who we knew could fulfill that role. And Natalie Elgip from Mexico, from underneath the jungle, we'd worked with her before. We'd love to work with her again. So we put her in that position together with Rasmus Dysted and Robin, because Robin was out there. He knows how the caves are in that area. So that team was great for that. And then we were looking at the science. We were working with different universities, and putting together a scientific program is not just having a biologist saying, yes, we would like a water sample. You gotta have the whole picture. So where do you want the water sample? How many liters? And what about pollutants? There were so many questions that needed answering. So we reached out to Jill Heinert. She's also a dear friend and another mentor. And she said yes. And then unfortunately, she never managed to get all the way out to Indonesia, because at the time of the expedition, she got an honorary PhD.
Yeah, doctorate.
This is doctorate, there we go, So she didn't manage to join us in the field, but she was helping on the side. And that's what we did. We just sat down and thought, what are the areas that we're going to be covering on this expeditions, and who would be the best in that field of area, like underwater photography? Who else would we talk to than Alex Dawson? And everybody said yes. Yeah.
And you can imagine why they said yes, but obviously there's a great time commitment to be involved in something like this, and I'm assuming cost as well. So yeah, congratulations on pulling together the team you did. Let's run through who was there. So I mean, there was yourself and Rannva, Rasmus, Robin, Natalie Gibb, and again, Natalie's been a guest on the show. Everyone's been a guest, so I'm pretty pleased that at least these people have been on here as well. But what an amazing team. I think you had David Meyer there as doing the cartography and mapping. Yeah, who else was there?
Then we had Tamara May.
Yes.
She was also on the mapping team together with Odita Harsono from Indonesia and Ari Saputra, also Indonesian. Incredible divers. Robin Cuesta, who we already mentioned, and then Alex Dawson for the underwater videography and photography with his amazing light assistant Magnus from Sweden.
Yes.
So they were working with these big blue lights throughout the cave, and I can talk hours about the lighting that they put in that cave. There's something about diving through a cave just with your own light, and then you suddenly have Alex and Magnus putting different lights around it, and you see the full extent of these underground galleys. this was one of the highlights of my project. But one thing was the diving team. One of the aspects of the teams that we were really proud of was the dry cavers. We had some of the best dry cavers of Indonesia joining the expedition, and several of them were also cave divers. So besides being archaeologists and biologists and rope experts, they were also joining doing the mapping of the cave, because this cave was very intricate. You have about 100 meters of full cave. So imagine you start in the jungle and then you walk down stairs about 130 steps. I don't remember. People kept counting them, but I just kind of just turn my head off and walk. Yeah, because after
and this is down and
4,
up,
5,
right?
6 hours of dives.
This is not horizontal. This is down and up. So
Exactly. And these dives were long, because once you were in there, we planned the dive so we could keep going. But you go down about 130 steps, and then you got a small pool of water, maybe 10 times 15 meters across. And already there, you see these beautiful fossilized coral reef on the walls. And then you dive into this glass clear water, and for about 100 meters, this is full cave then. So that means it's a tunnel with no air, no nothing. It's just dark tunnel. And again, amazing fossilized coral reef, giant clams the size of,
I saw one of the images.
Tiny cars, I was about to say. Yeah,
exactly.
I've never seen anything like this on a living reef. Just stunning. And then after about 100 meters, you have approximately 1 kilometer of river running underground. So it's air pockets. You can get out, you can wander around, but it's about 1 kilometer of air. You're still underground, so it's completely dark. But you have bats in there and testing the air we could breathe. Why I'm telling you this is because that kilometer of kind of underground river is really hard to map as cave diving team. So we had to pull in the dry caving team, who were running around working at finding entries to this aquifer, Lawi, which is called. They were working on top, and we had to pull them underground to work with David's team to map this passage of River Park. And it was absolutely incredible to see this team kind of almost crawling on the walls in these beautiful big galleys. In there was no stalagmites or stalactites. There's no decorations in this area, so they could actually walk around without damaging the cave. But I remember coming back with Rannva on a dive. We were sampling in the cave, Rannva and I, for the scientists. And we're coming back on our scooters, and then we can see there's a lot of light in this area. We're in the river part now, and it's very shallow, a lot of light. And then we see some tanks that was just dropped by a ledge. And then on top of us, you got this bum sitting in the inner tube of a car wheel, sailing with a fin as the, what do you call this in English? The oar?
Paddling. Yeah.
Paddling along with the fin. Yeah. And it was the dry caving team just sailing around in the inner tubes of car tires and mapping out with little lasers this section of the cave.
Wow.
They had to do this job because one of the quests from the scientists was to understand exactly the extent of the water, because the whole idea of this expedition was to do the initial steps of a GeoPark for the area. So in order to understand which area is needed for protection, they wanted to understand where's the water running by that, making the outskirts.
Brilliant. And when you say GeoPark, you're talking about a UNESCO preserved region for environmental and geological significance, I guess, is what you're saying.
Yeah, eventually. So we are all very excited about the cave diving aspect of this cave because it's beautiful with the fossils that I am referring to. But for the islands, it can prove a completely different future for them compared to a lot of the other islands in the area. Indonesia has a huge population exploding, and they are digging out the underground on many of these little local islands because it's cast underground. And this limestone is what is used in cement. So a lot of these are facing futures of their islands being exploited for the limestone. And with that, obviously creating havoc on fauna and biodiversity.
Sure.
This cave is, I wouldn't call it a golden ticket because that has a negative cling to it. It's so much more than that. It is a gateway to nature preservation and conservation, but also a future for the local people on the Pulau or the Moon, the island of Pulau Muna. I was telling you that when I got excited, my English was going to be slipping from me.
Well, I think there was actually Indonesian. I think it was Indonesian there that was tripping you up, not the English. So yeah, Pulau Muna. Exactly. Awesome. Yeah, I've spent a fair bit of time in Malaysia and Indonesia, and the islands are all referred to as Pulau. So I get that. Awesome. Yeah, and that's just such an interesting aspect because I don't know if many realize how big Indonesia is in terms of its actual island mass. It's a group of islands, but I don't know the population, but I think it's in the several hundred million. So it is a big place in terms of population, and yet there is so many remote islands there that are either sparsely inhabited or not exploited, as you point out. So yeah, really interesting. Hey, I'm Steve Davis, host of the podcast Speaking Sidemount and principal instructor of Sidemount Pros. Are you hungry for detailed information about Sidemount diving? Well, I have just the thing for you. My Sidemount Fundamentals eBook is the complete reference to the Sidemount Pros Fundamentals course. It meticulously covers every aspect of Sidemount diving as I teach it on my courses, including why would you want to dive Sidemount? Sidemount diving applications, Sidemount equipment selection and setup, and then putting it all in the water from dive planning, technical diving hand signals, Sidemount entries and donning your equipment, correct weighting, trim and balance, and Sidemount gas management and regulator switching, and then of course Sidemount exits and doffing your equipment. We also cover the 10 fundamental Sidemount skills that you need to know to be an effective Sidemount diver. And then we cover the importance of training, your base Sidemount course, and then the importance of continuing to practice skills as you evolve and grow as a Sidemount diver. Check it out. It's available on the Sidemount Pros website, www.sidemountpros.com/store. It's inexpensive, and I'm certain that it will help your Sidemount diving. How would you describe the project? So in your presentations and so on now, obviously you're talking about the project. We've talked a bit about what's involved in it, but what happened? What happened when you actually started to proceed down this path?
Yeah, well, basically was Robbie Schmittner turned on a light in us that you could take the skills from cave exploration and then you could add conservation and just a higher purpose to that. So we spent 2 years putting together this expedition, finding the funding, which obviously had to be substantial for getting a team of this size. We were 28 on the team, getting that kind of team and the training and the equipment to pull this off. We were flying a majority of the team to Mexico to train them before we were doing the actual expedition because we needed to be on the same type of equipment. So those who were not diving sidewinders needed to do crossovers. We needed to work with the type of scooters that we was going to be using during the project. We needed to have the mapping team train with David Mayer. So there was a lot of pre-expedition going on, that whole planning phase. And as I mentioned the container earlier, there was a lot of that, the whole part of assembling everything. I mean, we're going to bring out all the tanks. We had halcyon regulators from here to the end of the world that needed assembling, Sofner lime for the rebreathers. The Danish National Army was lending us compressors. So all of that took up so much time. And then finally we got out there and the orchestra started playing, and the biggest part of the expedition was the conservation and the scientific factor of it. And everything that had been going on up until this point was leading to the first dive of the expedition, which was a dive to collect environmental DNA. And we'd been working together with the Marine Genome Project on this, as well as Copenhagen University, the University of Gajah Mada in Indonesia, and Christina Toxberg, which was our science coordinator, to figure out how could we sample environmental DNA from the cave without polluting it. And this is where Rannva and I was very smart, because being the science divers on the team, it meant that we had to do the very first dive. So everybody would have to wait back until we had done this one dive. And yeah. So we disinfected our gear, and as we were getting ready, we had the first two scientists. We had scientists joining throughout the expedition on a roll, depending on the time of the project. And we had the DNA scientist and the biological scientist setting up the laboratory inside the cave as we were kitting up. And I can't say how much excitement was involved, because it can't be measured, but also the pressure for coming back with something that would actually work. They were setting up a cave lab and was so excited for this opportunity. This have only been done, to our knowledge, in Sardinia by Marine Genome Project so far. So we were going to be bringing out vital data, but then you know what it's like, Steve, and I bet everybody listening to this podcast know exactly what I mean. When you drift into that dive and everything kind of just steps back a little bit. That was incredible. We were out there, the whole team had assembled. We had the scientists building their lab as we were getting the first samples. Rannva had not been in the cave at this point, and I've been going on for 2 years plus about the beauty of it. And Rannva and I, we've been diving a lot together, and we always, you know, you have to dive in a single profile when you go cave diving, and it's always a matter of who gets to go first, because being first, you just get that wow on the cave. And it was her time, and I was really excited to see her dive into Lawi Lawi, and it was just a beautiful moment. And we went and we collected what we needed for the scientists to start with. We came back with water samples, we came back with sediment samples, fossils, we collected stalagmites, stalactites, and we were doing this throughout the project, Rannva and I, on different stations. So whenever the cave would change, either in depth or in temperature or in salinity, then we would set up a station. So for us, that was our primary goal throughout the project. But coming back from that first dive, that was just like a start button for the rest of the expedition. Then you would have the push divers start putting tanks through the cave, because we were going to have so many people move through the cave. For maximum security, we were staging tanks throughout the cave in case of somebody having an issue in there. So they started doing that, and the mapping team started getting to work on measuring out the cave. The dry cavers started hacking through the jungle with their machete. They found 22 caves in the near proximity of this cave system. And they were coming back with pictures of archaeology and different specimens they were sampling for the biologists. And like everybody was just busy bees from day one. As the project was moving onwards, this was a 3-week, 21-day for the actual expedition. And people might think that 21 days is not that much. But to be honest, when you are in the middle of nowhere and people are doing dives that are between 3 and 6 hours long and with very specific targets and objectives, and you're just so much into the project, the days get long and you get tired. But you're asking about how the expedition then rolled on. We were doing this day in, day out for 21 days. And of course, we started to reach our goals. The scientist was on a roll. So the biologist left, and then the geologist came in, and then the hydrologist came in. and they constantly had different things that they needed answers to. So for the science team, we had our objectives changed, but this was all part of the bigger plan.
Mm-hmm.
I think those who had the probably the biggest challenge was the mapping team. Yes. For the reasons I explained, with the river section being so hard to map, but that too was fulfilled. And yeah, I can proudly say that we relayed a lot of data and information for the University of Gajah Mada.
Amazing. And with all of these moving parts, the coordination of the project, there must have been a fair bit in managing. I mean, you and Rannva led the project, but Rasmus led the actual project team there. How did that all coordinate together? How did you make sure all the moving parts worked properly together?
We very quickly decided on a proper expedition hierarchy. Mm-hmm. So, of course, we had everybody comes in with their skills and their experience and was picked for that reason. So moving into the project, we had a lot of meetings. On every second week, the scientists would work together online to put together the science program. But then for the different dive teams, we would have team leaders. So David Mayer would lead the mapping team. Natalie L. Gibbs would be the full dive team lead. Christine Toxwed was leading us at the science team. And then on top of that, you would have Rasmus Dysted as the expedition leader, just to have a final say. And Rasmus is incredible at keeping a very clear mind in all situations. Mm-hmm. So every day when we were done with our tasks, we would come back, there would be debriefings, all the different teams would meet with their team leaders, and then the team leaders would sit with Rasmus and they would have the planning for the next day. And every day it was a huge task of Robin was doing an incredible job as an octopus, just getting everything running with cars and food and logistics, water and drinks. Just the logistics. I mean, he did incredible. And then, Rasmus overseeing all of that, and the rest of us just doing our best to do our part.
Amazing. And we'll talk about the outcomes in a minute. But before we get there, I mean, this is a diving podcast. And so obviously our audience are divers. And that's so interesting to me too. Just every aspect of that, from the equipment selection through to the training and then the planning and then the execution of the dives. Talk us through a little bit about how you pulled all of that together. I'm a Sidewinder diver, so I'm really interested in why you chose the Sidewinder, for instance, and how the training went. We actually met in Mexico. I actually just came to me. We were in Mexico at the same time when I was doing my Mod 2 course with Patrick, and I remember meeting Rasmus, which was awesome, and also hanging out with you guys and having some nice dinners there. That was brilliant. We didn't get to dive together, which was sad, but still, we were there at the same time. But that was really an important component of the project, I'm sure. So tell us a bit about how that all got pulled together.
Rasmus and I had been out there before, so we knew exactly what we were going into. In 2020, when we were doing the initial dives in the cave with Robin, we had to bring everything as well. And I remember when I asked Robin, what do we need to bring? This was in the very beginning of him being in the area. He said, everything, bring everything. So we knew we were going to go down that road again. And as you know, every diver come with their own spare parts of everything. And we couldn't have that. First of all, because there's limit on what they could be transporting on the airplanes. The last you've been there, you say? So you know that last little
not
propeller.
to Sulawesi here, no. No, I haven't, unfortunately.
You gotta go, Steve. You will absolutely love it. I know that.
Thank you.
But your final plane is a tiny little propeller. So there are definitely limits. And I know just Alex Dawson coming in with his equipment, I think, was it 120 or 140 kilograms that he was hauling of camera gear. So we were bringing in spools and line to be laid. Everything that was going to be needed for the entire project needed to be hauled. So we wanted to make sure that the equipment was streamlined. And that's why we chose to uniform on one unit. And we chose the Sidewinder because it works very well in exploration, but also for the way that you can actually fix this rebreather. I know I'm going to be stepping in a few toes when I say it's a Home Depot rebreather, but it is simple in that way.
There's nothing to it really, is there? I mean, if you think about what a rebreather needs to have, that's what it's got. Doesn't have anything else.
Yep. And I remember doing the Xunaan Ha project that Tamara, she was on a Sidewinder and she had a faulty loop connection and she just fixed it with duct tape. And I'm like, right, that's exactly what we needed when we were out there.
Yeah, exactly.
I dive. Yeah, I'm normally an IQ suck girl. I love XCCR. It's a beautifully engineered unit. It is brilliant to dive, and it's a very, very safe and very smart rebreather, and it dives perfectly as well. But it's just, I couldn't force everybody to go on a back-mounted unit because that wouldn't make sense for the push team. So we had a lot of debating back and forth. Rasmus and Rannva are also IQ suck, and Dawson is dive suck or Liberty. So there was just so much going on. So we chose the Sidewinder, and having that pre-expedition training for the majority of the team really made sense. We also had the chance to train on Seacraft scooters for the science team. We had Seacraft for the reason of carrying through the scientific samples in the cave. And just because the cave was huge as well. I mean, it was 5.2 kilometers of cave that we were working in.
Which Seacraft scooter did you use?
So in the container, we have a couple of Ghost scooters and Future. But as we couldn't get our container into Indonesia, we ended up diving Seacraft's Future because you can fly with them. And then we were actually fortunate enough to dive the Go scooters. So I love them. They were fantastic little working horses. If you're looking at finding a cool little scooter that does the job with super pull power, I think the Go scooters are incredible.
They're unbelievable, aren't they? I dive a Go, and I'm not a cave explorer, and I don't have to go 20 kilometers into a cave or anything like that. I mean, I've given the Go a good run. Its range on cruise is about 10 kilometers according to the manual, right? I've never tested that. I have no idea whether that's true or not. I'm sure it's got to be close because I've run it for literally 4 or 5 dives in a row, smashing it absolutely 6, 7, 8 from time to time, and I've never had an issue with running out of power. It's so fast that on the Sidewinder, I've had my loop ripping out of my mouth and my mask, flooding because, that's how fast it is as well. Especially if you're streamlined, I will say that. And it's simple again, there's not much to it. The last thing for me, which was almost the most vital thing, is you can travel with it. It's got just fantastic travel-friendly batteries, all broken into components in a nice little bag that you can travel with. What a beast of a machine. And I just love it. And also then the other thing, it's only 10 kilos. So if you have to carry it anywhere, it's light.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful little unit. Yeah, so talking about the whole project and all of the different aspects, we just knew that we had to prepare at an extremely high level. So that's why we had so many team leaders coming in with their say on what was going to be going on out there, exactly the type of equipment was needed for their areas. And with that, we managed to bring everything we needed, even though we couldn't bring the container. We managed to source in the end, which was another headache, but we got it through. I think one of the highlights of the planning part was hard, and definitely it's going to be easier next time. But where it all come together is, in my recollection, there's 2 points. There is, 3. The initial dive with Rannva, where we were going to sample, as I explained. And of course, coming back and giving the samples to the scientists. Ida was standing there in her full gear, her full science gear. I'm not a scientist at all. I'm a diver through and through. But having her pushing through this water to look for microorganisms as we were getting off and going up the stairs, that just made me so happy. But the second point was going into the local village, we had 2 events where we gathered the people of Lasonko village and we put up a big screen and we showed them what was under their feet. And then we had the scientists do presentations explaining them in turn from their field of knowledge why this area was significant. And you could just see the light turning on in their eyes. So that was incredible. But I would say the third and most memorable thing from all of this hard work coming into this project was being at the very furthest end of the cave. So I explained you go for 100 meters of full cave, and then you got 1 kilometer of river, which is beautifully flowing, clear water through this incredible fossil of a coral reef. And then from there, the cave ducks down and becomes these kind of rocket big tunnels, still fossilized, but a little bit more soft. And there was a dive where I was diving with Rasmus because we were, of course, jumping in different positions when we were finished with our task. So I was going to go and I was going to do LRUTs. I was going to measure the height and the width from the line that was being put through the cave. And with that, you can then calculate Dr. Eco, which is the lead scientist of the expedition, with a very fitting name. Dr. Eco could then use our measurements, right? Could not picture it.
No.
So Dr. Eco needed to understand the mass of water. So we were measuring up the tunnels, and Rasmus and I was going to the furthest end of the cave. And you're so far in now, at this point, about, 4 kilometers or so. And there you have like a fork in the cave. And Rasmus and I were doing this together. You know, you send up a little bottle with some air and on a measuring tape, and then you note down, okay, there's maybe 4 meters to the ceiling. And then you pull out a measuring tape to the wall on the right and then to the left. It takes forever. So we decided to split up. Obviously, solo diving is nothing that should ever be promoted, but we are trained to do this. We knew exactly what we were doing. We knew exactly where each other was, and we split up. And I remember I had about 45 minutes on my own, just measuring this cave in the very furthest part. And every time I was trying to put down the measuring tape, I would see and spot a new coral or a sea urchin or something that was living there hundreds and thousands of years ago. And it was just remarkable. It was remarkable to be in there and be able to gather data and do what we love and do a difference. So
amazing. Yeah, and very, very, very few people get to see or experience that sort of thing as well. And so, yeah, amazing. I mean, I've talked a lot about solo diving on Speaking Sidemount too. So I think we're in good company here in terms of the fact that while for the majority of the recreational community, for sure, solo diving's not a good idea, but having undertaken the right training with the right equipment and the right circumstances with planning and forethought and preparation, I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all. And I solo dive a lot, but I know when I should and when I shouldn't. And there's places where I will and where I won't. And everyone should be able to make their own decision for themselves, I think, to a large degree. So don't worry, you're in good company here in terms of what you did there, and there's been plenty before you. Well, that's really cool. Now, obviously, you're at the end of the project now, and you've talked a little bit about some of the things that you're really proud of, and I think there's just a massive amount of accomplishment there. Where to from here? What's happening around the project now that it's completed, and what's happening next?
Ooh, good question. And to be honest, there's a lot of areas that we haven't even touched base on and probably won't have the time for, but there are the data that was collected is being crunched or crushed, do you say that, by the scientists
crunched,
now. So
yes,
they are
yes.
they're looking into the dating of the cave through the stalactites that we were gathering for them. They're looking into the water samples to look for DNA, which is interesting for medicinal science. So there are different aspects now that they're working on, and that's out of our hands. Then we have the cultural aspect. We had Linnea Buckingham with us who's an archaeologist, and this woman has so many forces, but she was also in charge of cultural heritage. So she was doing studies around the community's engagement with water and the cultural aspect they had. And we realized there's so much folklore. I'm not going to go into it, but she was doing some different data sampling out there and is putting together a report on her understanding of the area and their relation to water. Then we got the more fun parts. We have a flag return. We were a flag expedition for the Explorers Club, and we have the annual meeting for the Explorers Club. Yeah, coming up. So we'll be returning the flag in the headquarters in New York in April. And that's going to be cool because that's going to be a very proud moment to stand there. And the flag was nearly 100 years old, and it's been to different parts of the world and all corners, and we got to bring it with us. Then we have, for the island, we have a lot of work that needs to start or continue there, and that's that whole application process of a geopark. Before it can even become a UNESCO geopark, you need to make it just a regular geopark for the area. So there's many steps. For that, Robin Cuesta is together with Dr. Eco doing different reports on what was found and the significance of that for the area. There is going to be a task force locally to gather people that would like to work with the geopark, because you can't just say this is a geopark. Obviously, you have to apply for it, but then there needs to be different things in place as people needs to work at the geopark and needs to
manage the park.
Exactly. So that's a long-term project or work that needs to go locally. For us in Nixie, I think Rannva and I, Rasmus for that sake as well, we realized that as divers, the skills that we have are actually needed. To become the extended hands of the scientist is something that is needed more and more. As we move forward, we need to go deeper, we need to go further underground to find the data that might aid us in this time of need for the planet, both when it comes to, like in this project, create geoparks, but also for finding medicines that can be changed when we have bacteria resistance and all of these different antibiotics. So for us in Nixie, we have actually a lot of different proposals now that we are sifting through, and we have a project coming up in next year, which is not the same size, but a little bit more manageable. This is going to be in the ocean. And then it looks like we're settling on a project in 27 back in Indonesia as well. Same kind of DNA in terms of cultural heritage, aquifer conservation, and scientific sampling through the extended hands of cave divers and dry cavers. So we are on a path that feels incredible. And feels like a calling.
Wow. Yeah, and what a life you lead. I mean, you were sharing with me off mic before, while we were trying to sort out technical difficulties, how you'd just been to French Polynesia as well and got the opportunity to dive underneath pearl farms. So amazing life you lead, Maria. I mean, it's not only should you be proud of that, but role modeling, I think, for other women divers in particular is amazing. So talk a little bit about that, because I know that was part of what you were doing too. There was an education aspect for kids at school, and there was an aspect of teaching them about science and diving. But there was also, I think, an inspirational side to that. Yeah, tell us a bit about what you and Rannva were doing with that.
Gladly. You were asking before also what's in the future, and I was talking about the flag return and ECAT, but there's a lot of speaking obligations as well. One of the things that we were doing during the project was live cast into children's classrooms through Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants.
I like it.
So we had the other... Huh?
I like it. I like the subject or the title.
Right, Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. It's fantastic. Basically, we got to live cast into these classrooms of children and explain to them week to week throughout the expedition what we were doing, why we were doing it, putting the scientists on camera and having them explain why it was important. And then by the end of each session, you would have the kids walking up to the screen and they would have questions that they had prepared in class.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think that's the heart and soul of what we're trying to do. Like I was explaining with Xunaan Ha, that there's so many projects going on. There's so many people doing incredible work, fascinating science, but it hardly ever reaches the people, like the general public, or especially our children who we really need to inspire. So a hard or a large portion of what we're trying to do is involve these classroom sessions and these children and universities as well and media, just to explain that there is stuff being done and it can be done.
Yes.
I mean, Rannva and I and Rasmus and Robin, we're all rascals, you know. We're like you, Steve. We're divers by heart.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we love what we do, but we can actually do a difference when we put our heads together with people like Jill Harnett and Alex Dawson and Dr. Eco. So that's a huge part of this, is to talk into youngsters and these kids, and then from there on, of course, into companies and places like the Explorers Club, or where you have a little bit more pull power, because this is important as well. We need to get these positive stories out there. It's not all dark. There is stuff. Shit is happening. We are getting stuff done, you know?
Exactly. And you're absolutely right. If it wasn't for, number one, you doing it, but then the work that you do around it. I think I remember mentioning this during Xunaan Ha in terms of the video work and what was happening in social media and so on as well. You know, it's just so important that the message gets out. And I think that starts, as you did, with the community that you're dealing with. I mean, the fact that you were educating the local community about the importance of the aquifer under their feet, that they don't see, that they might be quite tempted to not only exploit for water, but inadvertently damage. And, you know, as humans, we are quite damaging to the environment. And when I say quite, that's actually an understatement. We're very damaging to the environment, left to our own causes. However, I mean, with awareness, we can make changes. And so, you know, what you're doing there, both on a local level and also now on a global level, in reaching people and explaining what is beneath the surface and what is in these caves and other areas, is just amazing. And I think as a diver, I mean, what captures me, I mean, diving's fun. Diving is awesome. But diving with a purpose is another level. And that's what drew me to technical diving. That's why I cave dive. And unfortunately, I got into it way too late. You know, I'm sort of closer to the end than the beginning, unfortunately. And there's people like you that are driving forward for the younger people. So I see the look on your face, but it's true. It's true.
That's not true at all.
I'm close to retirement age, Maria. So so I'm thinking about when I'm retiring now, let alone. But that doesn't mean that I stop diving. In fact, it means I dive more.
Yeah, I was about to say, you'd be perfect for a project then. You don't need time off from work.
Exactly. I'm just waiting for my invite, Maria.
Duly noted.
And one last thing, I just want to close with one last point. I want to thank you so much for joining us. But secondly, for having the map of the world behind you with New Zealand just featured right in that little corner. I'm pointing to it now. Turn around.
Can you see that? Can you actually see the map?
Yeah, and quite often maps of the world, for some reason, there was a major drama in this country because we quite often get left off the map, and there'll be a map of the world, and you'll see Australia, and we're missing, but you've got us there. So that was quite exciting to me to see that. And if we turn the camera further, we'd see how far away we are, and yet here we are chatting. So it's been brilliant. Yeah. I have loved learning more about the project. Thank you for sharing. You shared the report with me as well, and it was such a professional document and summary of the project, of course, but you could see the work that had gone in. You could see what was captured, how valuable that is. And for you and Rannva as leaders of that to have pulled that together, I think it's just spectacular. So congratulations, and you should be very proud of that work.
Thank you very much, Steve. And thank you for letting me talk about it. I'm sure I have forgotten a lot, people and facets of the project. Yeah, these kind of things as well. It's actually important that you just take a little step back and then look at it from a new angle afterwards as well. We have learned a lot, and I am looking forward to moving onwards to the next project. It's great working together with Rannva. Rasmus and Robin was incredible as well. The whole entire team was lifting this task up. Like you said, diving for a purpose just makes everything so much better. So let's see if we can continue down that path, all of us.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much. And you and I, we have to make sure we catch up soon somewhere. Don't come to the South Pacific without telling me again.
I'll try not to.
Sadly, OzTech is happening this weekend and neither of us are there. That was a great conference, and but it's my mother's 85th birthday on the weekend, so there is no way in the world I'm going to miss that. She's awesome, and we've got a very exciting weekend coming up, and there'll be another OzTech for me. And thanks so much,
I just
Maria.
saw
We'll catch
Michael
you soon.
Menduno. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, no, Michael's been here. Sorry, we're trying to say goodbye. Michael's in New Zealand now, so he and I were on a call earlier this week, and he's got family here, so he's on his way to Australia now.
Yeah, I just met him up in Sweden, and we were just talking about the last OzTech and all the dancing and stuff that went on. So sad to miss that, but I completely understand why you miss it out on your mother's birthday. So good on you.
Thanks again, Maria. Appreciate it.
Welcome, Steve. Talk soon.
You've been listening to Speaking Sidemount from www.sidemountpros.com. If you like the podcast and would like to support the show, then why not become a patron of Speaking Sidemount? For as little as $5 per month, you can become a part of the Speaking Sidemount team, get exclusive early access to all of the episodes, and help us to deliver the very best Sidemount, cave, and technical dive content available. Just go to www.patreon.com/speakingsidemount for all of the details. The address is also on our Facebook page, listed in the podcast notes. Thanks again, and we look forward to you joining us for our next episode of Speaking Sidemount.